2,000 years ago, a man sat alone in a Roman tent and began to write. Not for publication, not for glory. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, picked up his stylus and wrote to himself, raw, unfiltered reflections on failure, mortality, and what it truly means to live well. These were not the words of a sage who had conquered life. They were the desperate, honest meditations of a man wrestling with chaos, searching for truth in the darkest hours. This is the art of Stoic journaling, and it may be the most transformative practice you've never attempted. Marcus Aurelius never intended his meditations to be read by anyone. What he created was not a philosophical treatise, but a private journal, a space where the most powerful human being alive could be utterly, vulnerably honest about his struggles. This is the crucial distinction that modern self-help culture has forgotten. Stoic journaling is not about documenting your victories or crafting a narrative of success. It is about confronting the raw material of your own consciousness without embellishment or self-deception. When Marcus wrote, he was not performing, he was excavating. He was peeling back the layers of false belief, social pretense, and ego that accumulate in the human mind like sediment. The journal became his laboratory for testing philosophical ideas against the abrasive reality of imperial politics, personal loss, and the knowledge of his own mortality. Seneca, in his Letters from a Stoic, understood this equally well. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days every month when you will be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" This was not asceticism for its own sake, it was investigative practice. Seneca was using his journal entries and letters to test his beliefs about poverty, discomfort, and fear. The genius of Stoic journaling lies in this. It is a place where you can be wrong, where you can contradict yourself, where you can express fears you would never voice aloud. It is precisely because the journal is private that it becomes truthful. The absence of an imagined audience strips away the performance. There is a particular gravity to beginning your day with the Stoic practice. Before the world makes its demands upon you, before email and obligation and the small violences of social interaction, there exists a pristine space, a few minutes of silence where you can prepare your mind like a soldier preparing for battle. Marcus Aurelius often wrote his meditations in the early hours, away from the court, away from the endless petitions of empire. He was not meditating to feel calm, he was rehearsing. He was mentally walking through the kinds of adversity, rudeness, and chaos he would encounter that day, so that when they arrived, they would not be strangers to him. This is what Epictetus taught his students, and what he returned to again and again in the Discourses. Make the best of what is in your control, and take the rest as it comes. The morning journal is where you draw the line between these categories. What is within your control? Your judgments, your responses, your values, your effort. What is outside your control? The weather, other people's opinions, whether your work is recognized, whether you are treated fairly. Begin your morning practice by writing down, simply and without poetry, the events you anticipate. Will someone criticize you today? Will you face failure? Will you encounter someone difficult, someone rude, someone indifferent to your suffering? Write it plainly. Then ask yourself, what principle will guide me? What would the virtuous person do in this situation? This is not positive thinking. It is not visualization of success. It is something far more useful. It is inoculation against disappointment. By rehearsing the possibility of difficulty, you rob it of its power to surprise you. At some point, you must take inventory, not of your possessions, they are mostly illusion anyway, but of your beliefs. The Stoic journal is a place where you interrogate your own mind like a prosecutor interrogating a witness. Where is it lying to you? Where is it disguising fear as certainty? Where is it claiming to want virtue while secretly grasping for wealth, status, or pleasure? Seneca practiced what we might call radical honesty in his letters. He would write about his own failures with surgical precision. In Letter 4, he confesses his weakness to Lucilius. "I am not as virtuous as I should be." This was not performed humility. This was a man genuinely encountering the gap between what he claimed to believe and how he actually lived. Your journal is the place for this same terrible honesty. Write down what you actually want, not what you think you should want, but what your actions reveal that you truly desire. Do you claim to value health, but spend your evenings in ways that destroy it? Do you claim to value friendship, but neglect the people closest to you? Do you claim to value your mind, yet fill it with noise and distraction? Marcus Aurelius returned repeatedly to this theme. Our life is what our thoughts make it. He understood that the mind manufactures its own prisons, its own justifications, its own comfortable lies. The journal becomes the tool for dismantling these self-deceptions. Write without editing. The practice is not literary, it is forensic. You are not trying to sound wise, you are trying to see clearly. What did you do today that betrayed your stated values? What lies did you tell yourself about why? What would it have cost you to act differently? This inventory is not punishment. It is the beginning of genuine change, because you cannot change what you refuse to see. Every person with ambition will encounter rejection. Every person with a heart will experience disappointment. The Stoic journal is not a place to process these emotions in the modern therapeutic sense. It is not a place to validate your hurt or build a narrative of victimhood. It is a place to examine what your attachment to the outcome reveals about your character. When Marcus Aurelius writes about setbacks, and he does repeatedly, though always with careful restraint, he returns to a single principle. The outcome is not your concern. Your concern is your effort, your intention, your adherence to virtue. Everything else is indifferent. Epictetus was even more direct. He had been enslaved. He had been tortured. He had suffered genuine, unspeakable abuse. And yet, in the Discourses, he speaks of such events with a kind of terrible clarity. It is not things themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about those things. When he lost his leg to torture, when his master twisted it, Epictetus is said to have remained calm, saying, "If you continue, it will break." When it broke, he said simply, "I told you so." This is not resignation. This is not passive acceptance. This is the most rigorous form of freedom. Freedom from the requirement that the world bend to your will. When you journal about rejection, write about it as data. What did you learn? What effort did you expend? Was it genuine effort or half-hearted hoping? Did you maintain your integrity throughout the process? These are the only questions that matter. Write about the rejection, yes, but write about it as a philosopher examining an experiment that did not produce the expected result. What you will discover over time is that this practice liberates you. You will begin to attempt more difficult things because you have severed the emotional consequence from the outcome. You have made it safe to fail. There is a particular practice that emerges from deep Stoic study, the practice of writing down not your failures, but your vices. Not individual mistakes, but the patterns of character that produce those mistakes. This is perhaps the most difficult chapter of Stoic journaling because it requires you to face something far darker than mere error. It requires you to face corruption. Marcus Aurelius was acutely aware that power corrupts, that proximity to luxury softens the will, that the absence of genuine opposition allows weakness to flourish. He wrote, "How small a part of the boundless and unfathomable time is assigned to every man, for it is very soon swallowed up in the eternal silence before and after. And how small a part of the substance, and how small a part of the universal soul. And of the whole universe, how small a part." This is not a comforting meditation. It is a confrontation with insignificance, designed to strip away the pretensions that sustain vice. You are not important. Your comfort is not important. Your reputation will not survive you. The universe does not care whether you are honored or despised. Given these truths, what justifies any departure from virtue? Write your vices down, not in self-flagellation, but in clear language. What are you? A person who lies to avoid discomfort? A person who seeks status through cruelty? A person who abandons their values for the approval of others? A person who loves their own pleasure more than they love their integrity? Seneca wrote in Letter 43, "It is precisely in times of immunity from care that the soul should toughen itself." The journal is your gymnasium. The vice you write about today is the vice you begin to train yourself against tomorrow. There is no moral progress without first seeing, without first naming, without first accepting the reality of what you have become. One of the most misunderstood practices in Stoicism is that of negative visualization, the deliberate imagining of loss, failure, and death. Modern psychology has mostly abandoned this practice, preferring instead the cultivation of positive thinking. The Stoics understood something that our contemporary culture resists. The mind that has rehearsed loss is far more resilient than the mind that has merely hoped for the best. This is where the journal becomes a sacred space. Here you are permitted, even encouraged, to contemplate your own mortality, to imagine the loss of everything you love, to rehearse how you would respond if your career ended tomorrow, if your health failed, if the person you care for most was suddenly taken from you. Marcus Aurelius returns to this theme throughout the Meditations with an almost obsessive frequency. He reminds himself that all things are temporary, that his beloved wife would die, that his children would face suffering, that his empire would crumble to dust. This was not depression, it was clarity. It was the foundation upon which he built his resilience. In your journal, write these scenarios, not to indulge morbid fantasy, but to test your philosophy. If you lost your wealth, what would you still have? If you lost your position, who would you still be? If you lost your health, what would still remain true about your ability to live virtuously? This practice serves a paradoxical purpose. By accepting the reality of loss in advance, by refusing to hide from the truth of impermanence, you become able to enjoy what you have with greater depth. The Stoic who has contemplated the death of his child loves that child more fiercely, not less. The Stoic who has imagined poverty appreciates security more genuinely. The practice of negative visualization is not pessimism. It is the antidote to the complacency that destroys meaning. As the day dies, there is a particular moment after the bustle has faded, after the demands have quieted, where the Stoic returns to the journal with a different question than in the morning. In the morning, you asked, "What will I face?" In the evening, you must ask, "How did I respond?" This is the practice of daily review, and it is perhaps the most essential practice in the entire Stoic arsenal, not because it allows you to judge yourself harshly, but because it allows you to see yourself clearly. Over time, patterns emerge. You see where your will is weak, you see where you are deceiving yourself, you see where you are making progress. Seneca practiced this with methodical discipline. He wrote that he would review his day each evening, examining his responses without judgment, but with perfect honesty. "I do not set a limit on shame," he wrote, "but rather on how I address my failings." The journal becomes a conversation between your present self and your better self, the self you are becoming through practice. When you perform this evening review, do not describe your day. Analyze it. Take 3 significant moments and examine them. In that conversation with your colleague, did you respond with virtue or with ego? When you encountered that setback, did you maintain equanimity or did you blame circumstances? When someone treated you unkindly, did you return kindness or did you nurse resentment? The crucial element is this: the review is not punishment. It is training. You are not meant to emerge from this practice feeling shame. You are meant to emerge seeing how you can improve tomorrow. The journal is a logbook of your moral development. Each evening you add a page. Each page is data. Each page is progress, even when it documents failure, because failure witnessed is failure being addressed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." The journal is how you become one. There will come moments in your practice when the journal becomes not a tool, but a lifeline. When darkness presses in, when you question whether any of this matters, when you feel the weight of your own insignificance and the futility of virtue in a universe that does not reward it. This is not a failure of the practice. This is the practice working as it should. The Stoic path is not one of transcendence into perpetual calm. It is one of descent into reality, and reality is often bitter. Marcus Aurelius himself experienced profound despair. He ruled an empire at war. He watched plague kill thousands. He lost most of his children before they reached adulthood. His own wife betrayed him, and yet he continued to write. Not because the writing healed him, it did not in any easy sense, but because the writing forced him to return, again and again, to what was actually true. When you journal through despair, you are not writing for encouragement. You are writing for clarity. You are asking, what do I actually know to be true right now? That I will die, that I cannot control what others think, that I have very limited power in this world. And from that foundation of brutal honesty, a strange strength begins to emerge. Epictetus told his students, I am an old man, a poor man, one with a useless body, but my will remains unconquered. This was not delusion. This was the practice in its most severe form, the knowledge that everything external can be taken, but the faculty of choice remains. The journal is where you practice claiming this, where you write again and again. I may be powerless over what happens, but I am not powerless over how I respond. When despair comes, and it will, the journal becomes not a record of achievement, but a record of persistence. You write not because you feel better, but because you refuse to surrender your agency to suffering. There is a temptation, when beginning a Stoic practice, to overcomplicate it, to develop elaborate systems, to buy expensive journals, to spend hours crafting perfect entries. This is the ego's infiltration of philosophy. It is the transformation of a tool into a vanity. Marcus Aurelius wrote on whatever was available. The Meditations has no structure because it was not meant to have one. Seneca's letters were often written in haste, squeezed between the demands of his public life. Epictetus had nothing at all, and yet his teachings were preserved by his student Arrian, who wrote down what he heard. The practice is the thing, not the journal itself, not the quality of the writing, not the consistency of the format. A simple notebook is perfect. 5 minutes is sufficient. 3 lines is enough. The Stoic journal is not a work of art, it is a work of philosophy, which means it is a work of truth-seeking, not beauty-seeking. In fact, there is wisdom in the very austerity of the practice. When you write plainly, in simple language, without pretension, you are forced to think plainly. Complexity of language often masks confusion of thought. The more straightforward your journal, the clearer your thinking becomes. Seneca advised, confine yourself to what is necessary. What is necessary is not difficult. What is difficult is not necessary. This applies perfectly to journaling. Do not track dozens of metrics. Do not create elaborate prompts. Ask yourself, what is the single most important question I need to ask myself today? Write the answer. Do this tomorrow. Do this the day after. This is discipline, this is practice. The journal that endures is not the one that is most beautiful or comprehensive. It is the one you actually use, the one that asks nothing more of you than your honesty. As your practice deepens, something strange begins to happen. You start to notice that the same themes recur, the same temptations, the same patterns of weakness, the same moments of clarity. This is not failure. This is not evidence that the practice is not working. This is the discovery of what Nietzsche would later call eternal return, the recognition that life has a shape, and you are learning to recognize that shape. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He wrote, the human soul degrades itself first and foremost when it becomes a kind of abscess and tumor on the world. And then, remember, the mind is your master. You need not the body's strength. And then, do the difficult things while they are easy. These are not separate insights. They are the same insight arriving again and again, in different forms, because the human being must learn the same lessons repeatedly, in deeper and deeper ways. The journal becomes a spiral, not a line. You return to the same place, but at a different level of understanding. Your journal will reflect this. You will see yourself wrestling with the same pride you struggled with years before, but from a different angle. You will encounter the same fear of insignificance that has haunted you since childhood, but now you know how to sit with it. You will face the same temptation to abandon your principles for comfort, but now you have a written record of what that abandonment has cost you before. This is the practice that sustains. Not novelty, not progress in a linear sense, but deepening understanding achieved through returning again and again to the fundamental truths. The journal is where you document this spiral, where you notice the recurrence, where you develop over time a philosophy not of advancement, but of deepening roots. One of the most profound aspects of Stoic journaling is that it is not a solitary act. When you open your journal and write, you are entering into a conversation with the greatest minds of human history. You are sitting down to write alongside Marcus Aurelius in his tent. You are speaking the same philosophical language as Seneca as he faced his own execution. You are inheriting the practice from Epictetus, who used words when he had nothing else. This is why the study of the Stoic texts is inseparable from the practice of journaling. When you read the Meditations, you are not studying philosophy as an abstract discipline. You are learning the language in which to speak to yourself. You are discovering the patterns of thought that have sustained human beings through unimaginable difficulty. You are being inducted into an ancient practice that transcends time. Marcus Aurelius wrote as if he were speaking to himself across centuries. His meditations were not meant to be discovered by generations to come, and yet they were. And now, when you journal, you are not alone. You are part of a conversation that has been ongoing for 2,000 years. You are writing with the weight of all those voices behind you, guiding you toward truth. Seneca understood the power of this communion. He wrote to his student Lucilius, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but he whose desires exceed his means." This was not Seneca speaking as an authority. This was Seneca as a fellow traveler, sharing what he had learned, offering his failures and insights to his student so that the student need not make the same mistakes. When you journal, be aware of this lineage. You are not inventing Stoicism. You are discovering it through your own lived experience, the way Marcus did, the way Seneca did. And in that discovery, you join them. Your journal becomes part of that ancient conversation. Perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of Stoic journaling is that it works not through inspiration, but through repetition. Not through sudden insight, but through grinding daily habit. The Stoics understood something that modern culture largely ignores. You do not think your way into being a good person. You act your way into it. And the journal is the place where you practice seeing yourself as you truly are, so that tomorrow your actions might be different. This is not motivation. Motivation fails. This is architecture. The journal provides the structure upon which new patterns of thought and behavior can be built. You write about your weakness not once, but repeatedly, until the reality of it becomes undeniable. You practice your principles not once, but daily until they become automatic. You rehearse your responses to difficulty until when the difficulty arrives, you respond without thinking, because the thinking has already been done in the journal. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to appear foolish and stupid regarding externals." This is what the journal allows. It allows you to fail repeatedly in the privacy of your own writing so that you might succeed in the world. It allows you to be wrong in the journal, to contradict yourself, to discover through writing what you did not know before you began. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." The journal is the gymnasium where you strengthen your thoughts. It is the practice field where you rehearse the person you are becoming. It is the evidence you leave for yourself that change is possible, because there, in your own handwriting, is the record of how far you have come. Years from now, if you commit to this practice, you will look back at what you wrote and marvel at how much you have changed. And yet the practice will have felt gradual, imperceptible. This is the power of habit working at the level of consciousness, transforming character so slowly that you do not notice until the transformation is complete. This is the true gift of Stoic journaling. Not transcendence, not enlightenment, not freedom from suffering, but the slow, steady development of the capacity to meet suffering with equanimity, to face difficulty with clarity, to recognize your weakness and respond with courage. This is all the practice promises, and it is everything worth having. We return at the end to the image with which we began. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, sitting alone with his thoughts and his stylus, writing to himself. He was not writing to change the world. He was not writing to become famous. He was not writing because he had solved the problem of how to live. He was writing because he had not solved it, and perhaps never would, and he needed to document the struggle. This is what Stoic journaling offers us, not a path to perfection, but a path to honesty. Not an escape from difficulty, but a way to face it without flinching. Not transcendence, but something far more valuable. the steady practice of becoming who we claim we want to be. The journal asks nothing more of you than your truth. It judges you only if you judge yourself. It condemns you only if you have already condemned yourself. What it offers, in return, is perhaps the deepest form of freedom available to human beings. The freedom that comes from knowing yourself fully, from hiding nothing from yourself, from accepting that you are flawed and proceeding anyway with the attempt to be virtuous. In a world that demands constant performance, that requires us to project success and certainty and control, the Stoic journal is a radical act of resistance. It is the space where you are permitted to be uncertain, to doubt, to fail, to start again. It is the gymnasium of the soul, where you strengthen not your reputation but your character, where you practice not for the approval of others but for the approval of your own deepest convictions. Begin today, not tomorrow, not when you have the perfect journal or the perfect time or the perfect words. Begin now with whatever you have. Write 3 sentences, name 1 weakness, acknowledge 1 failure, record 1 moment of clarity, and then tomorrow, do it again, and the day after, and the day after that. This is the practice that transformed an emperor. This is the practice that sustained a slave. This is the practice that has passed, almost invisibly, through 2,000 years of human suffering and joy, and it is available to you, now, in this moment, in the simple act of writing the truth.